The fire went out sometime in the night. You did not sleep through it. No one did. You felt it go, the way you always feel warmth leave a room, not as a sound but as a slow realization that the air around your face has changed, grown thinner, grown honest. And now it is the hour before dawn, the hour that has no real name, and somewhere in the village of Thornwick, a place so small that God might have forgotten it, a man named Edmund is already pulling on his boots. They are not good boots. They are the boots of a man who has never owned good boots, stitched from leather so old it has given up being leather and decided instead to simply be a kind of despair wrapped around his feet. He does not think about this. He has never thought about this. He laces them in the dark with the ease of a man who has done exactly this, in exactly this order, every morning for as long as he can remember, which is not as long as you might think, because remembering costs something, and Edmund cannot afford it. Settle in now, pull whatever warmth you have a little closer, because where we are going is cold in a way that your bones will understand, even if your mind does not. The single room Edmund shares with his wife, his mother-in-law, their 2 remaining children, and, on the coldest nights, the goat is exactly as it smells. Smoke and animal and something beneath both of those, something older, earthen, the particular smell of a life lived very close to the ground. There is no window, only a gap in the thatch that serves as one when the wind is from the south and serves as a very small catastrophe when it is not. The floor is packed earth. There is a table. There is a bench. There are straw pallets that were fresh once in a year. None of them are certain of. Edmund does not eat before he leaves. There is nothing to eat before he leaves. His wife, Margaret, will prepare pottage, a word that means, roughly, everything you have boiled together until it becomes something you can swallow. But that is for later, for the children. And she will thin it with water the way she always does, and think the thought she always thinks, and say nothing about it, because saying it would not change it. Edmund knows this. Margaret knows. Edmund knows. They have been married 11 years without ever speaking this specific truth aloud. And it is one of the many quiet understandings that constitute a medieval marriage. He steps outside into the dark, and the cold hits him like something personal. The mud is frozen at the top and soft beneath, so each step makes a sound like a small, wet secret. The field is already waiting. It is always already waiting. The field is the one thing in Edmund's life that does not need him to begin. It simply continues, row after patient row, under the same sky it has always been under. He picks up the tool, he begins, and somewhere behind him, in the room that still holds a little warmth from last night's fire, Margaret opens her eyes and lies very still, listening to the sound of his boots growing quiet in the distance, thinking something she will never say. The pottage is the colour of a decision you have already made and cannot unmake. Margaret stands over it in the grey milk light of early morning, stirring with a wooden spoon that has been in this family longer than anyone currently living in this house, a spoon so worn at its bowl that it is less a utensil now and more a suggestion, a memory of a spoon doing its best. The fire beneath the pot is small because the wood is almost gone, and the wood is almost gone because the Lord's forest begins exactly where Edmund's land, and the Lord's forest belongs to the Lord, and everything that falls in it, every branch, every wind-blown gift of timber belongs to the Lord also. This is called the law. Margaret calls it something else, but only inside her own head, where the law cannot reach her. She adds water to the pot, a little more than yesterday. She does not look at the children while she does it. Rest here for a moment. Let the warmth of wherever you are settle around you, because what is coming next requires your full presence and your full gratitude, though you will not be asked for either. The pottage is oats and a piece of dried something that was a vegetable in a previous life and has since undergone a philosophical transformation. There is no salt today. because salt costs money, and money is a theoretical concept in Thornwick, discussed the way people discuss good weather, fondly, abstractly, with the distant warmth of something rarely experienced. On a fine day, on a day when the harvest has been merciful and the tax collector has not yet arrived, there might be a heel of rye bread beside it. Rye bread that is dark and dense and slightly sour and absolutely magnificent because you have been awake since before dawn in a field in the cold, and magnificence is relative and hunger is an extraordinary seasoning. The children eat without speaking. This is not sadness. This is simply the way of a morning that has not yet decided to be anything. Here is what the pottage actually tastes like. It tastes like warmth first, because that is the first thing it is. And warmth in a cold room is not a small thing. It is everything. It is the entire point. Then it tastes of oat, which is a flavour both humble and honest, a flavour that asks nothing of you and gives exactly what it promises. Then it tastes of persistence, which is not a flavour as such, but which coats the back of the throat in a way that has no other name. People who have eaten like this every morning of their lives develop a relationship with their food that is not pleasure exactly and is not misery either. It is something more durable than both. It is the particular contentment of a body that has been given exactly enough to continue and has decided quietly that this is sufficient. There is a woman 2 doors down named Isobel. Isobel is 61 years old, which in Thornwick is so old as to be almost supernatural, and she has eaten pottage every morning for as long as anyone has been alive to remember her eating it. She says, and she says it with a straight face, with the absolute conviction of someone who has earned the right to mean it, that she has never had a bad bowl. What she means is not that every bowl was good. What she means is that she is still here. What she means is that the bowl was always enough, and enough, when you understand it correctly, is the only victory that matters. Margaret lifts the last of the pottage from the pot and divides it into the 2 bowls and the 1 cracked cup, and scrapes the wooden spoon against the rim with the care of someone for whom nothing is wasted, for whom the last clinging warmth of a nearly empty pot is also breakfast, is also something. She sits. She does not eat yet. She listens instead for the sound of Edmund's boots coming back across the frozen mud, still an hour away at least, probably more, and she holds the warmth of the fire against her palms, and she thinks, not about the thinned pottage, not about the Ward's forest, not about the winter still ahead, but about the way Edmund looked last night in the firelight before it went out. Just that, one small thing. The soil in this part of England has been turned by hands like Edmund's for so long that it remembers them, not in any mystical sense. The field is not magic. It is mud and cold, and the particular cruelty of a clay-heavy earth that freezes hard in winter and become a sucking grey paste in spring, as though the ground itself cannot decide what it wants to be, and has settled bitterly on difficult. But there is a kind of memory in worked land, a patience built up over generations, a density of human effort so compressed into the earth that you can feel it in your arms when the tool goes in. Edmund feels it every morning. He does not have a word for it. He just knows that this field is not empty, even when nothing is growing, even in the dead grey of February. Even now, he is not alone out here. He never is. To his left, close enough to call to, but far enough that calling would waste breath, is a man named Robert, who is Edmund's age, and Edmund's neighbour, and Edmund's closest friend, in the way that 2 men can be closest friends without ever having said anything to each other that was not about the weather, or the work, or the Lord's latest demand. Their friendship is conducted entirely in proximity. They have stood beside each other in this field, in this cold, under this same indifferent sky, for 20 years, This is what friendship looks like when time is the only currency you have. Breathe slowly now. Let the cold in just a little. Let the grey of it settle. The strip system, which is what this is, Edmund's land divided into long, narrow ribbons scattered across 3 great open fields, so that good soil and bad are shared roughly between all the village's families, is either a miracle of collective fairness or an exhausting inconvenience, depending on which morning you are having. Edmund's strips are not together, they are never together. He walks between them, tool over shoulder, boots making their wet, small secrets in the mud, and the walking is not counted as work, though it costs exactly as much as work, and by the time he reaches the far strip his shoulders already carry the morning's first weight. The tool is a hoe, ostly, sometimes a spade. In ploughing season, the ox, old, slow, magnificent in its indifference, will be borrowed from the village pool, because no single family owns an ox outright, because an ox is a kind of wealth so far beyond the individual, but it must be held in common, like the sky, like the cold, like the certainty of more work tomorrow. Edmund is good with the ox. The ox tolerates Edmund. This is the closest thing to mutual respect that either of them is capable of, and it is enough. What Edmund grows on these scattered strips of England is rye and oats, and sometimes barley, and sometimes, in a good year with a merciful God, and a dry August, wheat. Of this a portion goes immediately to the Lord as rent. A portion goes to the church as tithe. A portion goes to the miller as payment for grinding, because the Lord owns the miller and you must use the Lord's miller, and the Lord's miller will take his cut with the particular cheerfulness of a man who did not grow what he is taking. What remains after Lord and church and miller is what Edmund's family eats. It is, in years of ordinary luck, almost enough. In bad years it is a question that winter answers slowly, quietly, in ways that leave marks. Edmund does not think about this while he works, or rather, he thinks about it the way you think about the weight of your own body, always present, never examined, simply the condition of being alive in this particular form. What he thinks about actually, while the hoe rises and falls and the clay gives and resists and gives again, is a small and specific thing. There is a section of the south strip down near where it meets the common, where the soil is different, darker, richer, looser, the kind of earth that takes a seed like a kindness and gives back double. Edmund found it years ago by accident, the way you find most good things. He has never told anyone about not Robert, not Margaret, not the priest. It is the one secret the field has given him, and he keeps it the way he keeps most things of value. Quietly, carefully, entirely inside himself. The sky lightens by degrees, so slow they are almost theoretical. Robert straightens up for a moment, one hand on his back, and looks across at Edmund, and Edmund looks back, and neither of them says anything, and both of them understand everything, and they bend again to the work. The field does not end, it simply continues, the way all necessary things continue. Without drama, without apology, without the faintest suggestion that it will ever be finished, only that it will, tomorrow, still be here. And in the dark section of the south strip, near the common, something small and green is already thinking about spring. By the time the light has fully committed to being morning, not a warm morning, not a generous morning, but morning in the technical sense, the sense in which darkness has simply run out of argument, Edmund's hands have already forgotten what it felt like to be warm. This is not a complaint. This is not a complaint. This is not even a thought. It is simply the condition of hands that have spent 34 years becoming exactly what they need to be. And what they need to be is this. Hard. The skin across his knuckles is not skin in the way that you think of skin, soft and particular, and yours. It is something closer to bark, something that has made its peace with cold and wet and the wooden handle of a tool and has decided, practically, sensibly, to become more like those things and less like something that needs protecting. Edmund is 34 years old. He looks 50. This is not tragedy. This is simply the arithmetic of a body that has been used. Let that land somewhere soft in you, because it deserves to. In the village of Thornwick there is no physician. There is a woman named Agnes who knows plants, who knows which root drawn from the hedgerow and boiled in what proportion will ease a fever, which poultice pressed against an infected cut will draw the poison out, which prayer said over which remedy has, in her experience, the best record of results. Agnes does not distinguish sharply between the botanical and the spiritual. Neither does anyone else. When Edmund's shoulder seized up 3 winters ago, a deep grinding lock of something that had finally had enough, it was Agnes he went to, and Agnes who pressed her thumbs into the muscle with a certainty that was almost violent, and Agnes who gave him a small cloth packet of something dried and aromatic to hang above his palate, and Agnes who told him to sleep on his other side, and the combination of these things, or one of them, or simply time, eventually released it. He has not told Margaret how much it still aches on cold mornings. She would worry. Worrying would not help the shoulder. He has made a private calculation, the way he makes all his calculations, alone, quickly, without drama, and the result is, say nothing, keep working. Trust the body to manage what the body has always managed, and the body does manage. This is perhaps the most astonishing thing about the medieval peasant, the thing that a modern person, warm and fed and cushioned against almost every hardship that Edmund considers ordinary, would find most impossible to comprehend. The body adapts, not comfortably, not without cost, but with a thoroughness that is almost architectural, building tolerance into bone and muscle and tendon, the way a good craftsman builds tolerance into wood, knowing it will be tested, building in the margin before the testing begins. Edmund can carry weight that would injure a man who had not spent a lifetime carrying weight. He can work in cold that would stop a modern person within an hoe. He can read the sky, the particular grey-yellow of a sky about to deliver sleet, the too warm stillness that means frost tonight, the direction and texture of cloud that means rain before vespers, with an accuracy that requires no instrument, because his instrument is 40 years of accumulated Februaries, stored not in memory but in his body, in the way his knee tightens before rain, in the way his neck knows east. Robert's father lost 2 fingers to a scythe the summer Robert was 12. The fingers were gone, and that was the end of it. No surgeon, no stitching, a cloth bound tight and held tight, and eventually the bleeding stopped because blood, like everything else in Thornwick, could not afford to keep going forever. Robert's father worked the harvest with 8 fingers that year, and every year after, until he died, which was from something else entirely, something in the chest, something that came in winter and sat down and did not leave. 8 fingers were sufficient. The body revised its understanding of sufficient and continued. There is a kind of dignity in this that is very easy to miss if you are looking for the wrong kind of dignity. It is not the dignity of comfort or choice, or the leisure to tend carefully to one's own well-being. It is harder than that and quieter than that. It is the dignity of a body that has been asked everything and has answered every morning by rising. Edmund straightens now, briefly, and presses one fist into the small of his back and closes his eyes for just a moment against the white winter sky. His breath rises in a small cloud and disappears. He opens his eyes. He looks at the length of the strip, still ahead of him, at the cold earth waiting, at the pale sky pressing down on everything with its vast and equal indifference. He picks up the hoe. He does not sigh. Sighing is for people who believe something different was possible, and Edmund has never quite managed that particular luxury, which is, depending on how you hold it, either the saddest thing about him or the thing that will carry him, quietly and without complaint, all the way to the end. Here is something the history books do not tell you, because history books are written by people who were not there, and people who were not there tend to describe the Middle Ages in tones of grave solemnity, as though everyone in the 14th century was permanently on the verge of weeping into their pottage. The history books are wrong about this, not about the mud. The mud is accurate. The mud is, if anything, understated, but about the solemnity, about the unrelenting grey weight of it. They have missed something essential, which is that human beings are constitutionally, stubbornly, almost aggressively incapable of being miserable all the time, and the people of Thornwick are no exception. And on certain mornings, despite everything, despite the cold and the field and the Lord and the tithe and the boots that are a philosophical argument against hope, Edmund and Robert are genuinely, helplessly funny. It starts today with a pig. The pig belongs technically to a man named William, who is the closest thing Thornwick has to a prosperous farmer, a distinction that means William owns more of the same nothing than anyone else, and is consequently regarded with a mixture of respect and resentment that constitutes the medieval village's primary social texture. William's pig has escaped again. It escapes with a regularity that suggests either a profound intelligence or a profound dissatisfaction with William specifically, and this morning it has made its way into the far end of Edmund's south strip and is standing there in the half-frozen mud with the particular expression of a pig that knows it is wrong and has decided this is someone else's problem. Settle deeper now. This part you want to be awake for. Edmund sees the pig. Robert sees Edmund see the pig. Robert's face does something complicated and private. Edmund sets down his hoe with great deliberateness. Edmund sets down his hoe with great deliberateness. The deliberateness of a man assembling his dignity, and walks toward the pig, and the pig watches him come with small intelligent eyes and waits until he is exactly close enough to think he has a chance, and then moves. Not fast. The pig does not need to be fast. It only needs to be slightly faster than Edmund across ground that is frozen at the top and a sucking grey paste beneath. And it is precisely that fast. And what follows is 3 full minutes of a man and a pig engaged in a negotiation that the pig is winning. And Robert is laughing so hard he has to put his hand against his knee to keep himself upright, laughing in the way that men laugh when they have been cold and tired and silent for hours. And the laughter, when it comes, arrives with the force of everything that had no other place to go. Edmund catches the pig eventually. He always does. He returns it to William's yard with a dignity that costs him something, tracking mud that has now achieved a truly creative relationship with his boots, his leggings, one's sleeve he cannot account for, and Robert is still making a sound that is technically laughter, but has crossed the border into something more cellular, something happening in his ribs. This is the other truth of the medieval village, the one that sits beside the cold and the hunger and the endless work, and refuses to be cancelled out by them. The humour of people who have nothing to lose by laughing, the particular joy of a community so small and so densely known to itself that a man chasing a pig at 7 in the morning is a story that will be told with variations and embellishments for the next 6 months. Old Isobel will hear it by noon. The priest will hear a version so improved it barely resembles the original. William's pig will acquire, in the telling, an almost mythic cunning, a Homeric quality, and William himself will be somehow both victim and hero of his own animal's misbehaviour, which is exactly what William deserves. The fleas deserve their own accounting. Everyone in Thornwick has fleas. This is not a source of shame, because shame requires a baseline of flea-free existence against which to measure, and no such baseline exists. The fleas are simply part of the household, like the smoke and the cold and the smell of the goat, present and unpleasant and utterly unremarkable. Children scratch without looking up from whatever they are doing. Adults have developed the ability to scratch one place while their attention is entirely somewhere else, the way a modern person might check a phone. Automatic, habitual, woven so deeply into the texture of daily life as to be nearly invisible. Margaret has a technique involving a fine comb and a bowl of water that she applies to the children's hair on Sunday mornings with the focused efficiency of a woman who knows that perfection is not available and has decided that better will do. It does not solve the problem. Nothing solves the problem. It addresses the problem with the seriousness it deserves, which is moderate seriousness applied once a week and then set aside in favour of everything else. Edmund comes home at midday, grey with mud and still smiling about the pig. Margaret looks at him, at the mud, at the smile, at the mud, at the smile, at the mud again, and says something sharp and fond in equal measure, the specific combination that is the only language their marriage requires. He sits down heavily on the bench. He is, in this moment, something very close to happy, and the pig, back in William's yard, is already looking at the fence, with its small intelligent eyes, thinking whatever pigs think, entirely unrepentant, planning something. The bell rings at a frequency that is not really about sound. You understand this if you have lived your entire life within its reach, if you have never in all your years woken to a morning that did not begin with it, never eaten a meal that was not bracketed by it, never laid down at night without its last echo already fading into the dark above the thatch. After enough years, the bell stops being something you hear and becomes something you are made of, the way your heartbeat is something you are made of, present, structural, so fundamental to the experience of being alive in this particular body, in this particular place, that its absence would not be silence. It would be something much worse than silence. It would be wrongness. It would be the world coming briefly undone. Prime, tercis. Sext, none. Vespers, compline, the canonical hours, rung from the squat stone tower of St. Cuthbert's, which stands at the centre of Thornwick the way a spine stands at the centre of a body. Not decorative, not optional, simply the thing everything else is organised around. Edmund does not know these hours by their Latin names. He knows them by what they mean. Time to start, time to pause, time to eat if there is eating, time to stop, time to come home, time to sleep. The church has taken the shapeless body of a day and given it bones, and Edmund walks those bones without thinking about them, the way you walk your own skeleton, trustingly, entirely, without ever once considering what would happen if it were not there. Let the bell find you where you are. Let it mean something, just for a moment. The church itself is small and cold, and smells of tallow and damp stone, and the particular mustiness of a building that holds the whole village every Sunday, whether the whole village would choose to be held or not. The paintings on the walls, vivid, unsubtle, painted in reds and ochres by someone with strong opinions about hell, are the only images most people in Thornwick will ever see in their lives. There are no books in Edmund's house. There are no books in any house in Thornwick, except the priest's, and Father Aldrich's books are in Latin, which is a language that God speaks and educated men speak, and which exists at a great and permanent distance from the language of mud and pig and pottage. So the paintings on the church wall are everything. They are the Bible and the news and the reminder and the warning all at once, rendered in colours bright enough to penetrate the particular dimness of a medieval mind that has been working since before dawn and is now trying to remain vertical in a cold stone room on a Sunday morning while a man speaks Latin at it. Edmund believes. This requires stating plainly, without condescension, without the modern impulse to locate the superstition and feel superior to it. He believes the way he breathes, not as a choice made fresh each morning, but as the substrate of everything, the condition beneath all other conditions. He believes that God sees the field and the frost and the thin pottage and the pig and the fleas and the aching shoulder, and he believes that this seeing means something, though he could not say precisely what. And he believes that Father Aldrich, who eats better than anyone in Thornwick, and knows it and is quietly uncomfortable about it, stands in some real relationship to that seeing, however imperfect the vessel. What Edmund does not know, what he cannot know, standing in St. Cuthbert's on a February Sunday, with mud still in the creases of his knuckles, is that the church also owns a third of the productive land within a day's walk, that the institution he is tithing will grow to an administrati, the complexity that would baffle him entirely, that the same faith warming his chest this morning will, in 2 centuries, fracture so violently that men will kill each other over questions he has never thought to ask. He stands in his faith the way he stands in his field, as though it has always been here and always will be, which is the only way any of us ever stand in anything. In the back of the church, kneeling on the cold stone floor, because the pews, such as they are, fill from the front and the poor fill from the back, and the very poor kneel on the floor, is a young woman named Cecily. She is 17. She has been in Thornwick for 8 months, arrived with her mother from a village a day's walk east, a village that does not exist anymore for reasons no one discusses directly. She kneels with her hands pressed together and her eyes very focused on a point somewhere beyond the wall, beyond the painted saints and the painted sinners and the water stain shaped like a sleeping dog that she has memorized in detail over many Sundays. She is praying for something so specific and so private that it sits in her chest like a stone she has been carrying since before she arrived here. A stone she has not set down for 8 months. A stone whose weight she has learned to walk with the way Edmund has learned to walk with his aching shoulder, quietly, without complaint, as though the carrying is simply part of what it means to be alive. Father Aldrich's Latin washes over the cold room like water over rock. The bell, when it comes, releases everyone gently back into the Sunday afternoon, and Cecily rises from the cold floor and tucks whatever she was praying for back inside herself and walks out into the pale winter light, and does not look like someone carrying anything at all. The children of Thornwick do not have a childhood in the sense that you would recognize. They have something else, something that runs alongside what you might call childhood, the way a narrow path runs alongside a wide road, going roughly the same direction, arriving somewhere in the same vicinity, but narrower underfoot and considerably less forgiving of a wrong step. They play. This is important to say first, before anything else, because the impulse to play is so deeply sewn into the fabric of being young and human that not even the 14th century could fully suppress it, and the children of Thornwick play with a creativity born entirely of having nothing, which turns out to be one of the most generative conditions imaginable. A stick is a sword, a plough horse, a priest. A muddy ditch is a moat, a river, the edge of the known world. 2 children and a length of rope can construct an afternoon that requires nothing else. But childhood here is also short in a way that is not metaphor. It is short in the way a candle is short, not a complaint, simply a measurement. By 5 or 6, Edmund and Margaret's elder child, a boy named Thomas, is already useful in ways that are expected rather than celebrated. He carries, he fetches, he watches the younger ones while Margaret works and Edmund fields. He scares birds from the newly sown strips with a wooden clapper that he operates with a dogged persistence that is either duty or boredom or the particular blend of both that constitutes most of adult life, arrived at early. Come closer now. This part is quieter than the rest. What Thomas is learning in these years of carrying and fetching and bird scaring is not a curriculum. No one has sat down with Thomas and explained what he is being taught, because no one thinks of it as teaching. It is simply life, passing itself forward the way it always has. from the hands of one generation into the hands of the next. But the list of what enters Thomas through this casual, relentless transmission is staggering. He is learning to read the sky the way his father reads it, the yellow-grey of coming sleet, the too warm stillness before frost. He is learning which plants at the field's edge are edible in hunger and which will make you wish you had chosen hunger. He is learning the specific geography of obligation, who owes what to whom, which debts are spoken and which are only understood, the complex social cartography of a village that has no written records and therefore holds everything in memory, in the memory of people who learned it the same way Thomas is learning it now. He is learning also, without anyone intending to teach him this, that some things do not change. The Lord's portion does not change. The church's portion does not change. The cold does not change. The field does not change. There is a version of this lesson that produces a man who is beaten down by it, ground into the earth by the sheer, unmoving weight of how things are. And there is another version, rarer, more expensive, harder to sustain, that produces something else entirely. Thomas has not yet decided which version he is learning. He is 7. He has time. Less time than you would like for him, but some. Edmund's younger child is a girl named Alice, who is 4 and who has not yet been recruited fully into usefulness and spends her days in a state of furious, focused investigation of everything within her reach, which is considerable because Alice's reach exceeds her size in ways that regularly alarm Margaret. Alice does not walk through the world so much as interrogate it. She picks things up and puts them in her mouth and is told not to, and does it again with a different thing, storing information about the world in the only archive available to her, which is her body, which is the archive all of us begin with before we are given words for what we already know. What Alice is learning is harder to name than what Thomas is learning. She is learning the texture of things, the weight of a wet cloth, the particular resistance of frozen ground, the difference between her father's hands and her mother's hands, which is not a difference of size only, but of something more like temperature. Her father's hands are the cold that comes in from outside. Her mother's hands are the warmth that is made inside, and both of them are hers, and she reaches for both without preference, without strategy, with the pure democracy of someone who does not yet know that the world will eventually ask her to choose. There is a boy at the edge of the village named Peter, who is not quite 7, and who belongs to a family so poor that poor is not quite the right word, a family for whom poor represents an aspirational state rather than a description. Peter has been hungry more mornings than he has not. He is small for his age and serious for his age, and he has, in the 8 months since Cecily and her mother arrived from the village that does not exist anymore, attached himself to Cecily's presence the way cold attaches to stone, thoroughly, wordlessly, as though warmth and proximity are the same thing. Peter has decided something. He has decided it the way children decide things. Not in words, not in a moment, but in the slow accumulation of evidence that eventually tips into certainty. He has decided that he will leave Thornwick when he is old enough. He does not know where he will go. He does not know what leaving looks like, practically. For someone like him, the roads are dangerous, and the towns are distant, and the world beyond the village is a rumour at best, and a threat at worst. He knows none of this will stop him. He carries his decision the way Cecily carries her prayer, close and quiet and entirely alone. And tomorrow he will wake BF, or the bell for no reason he can name, and stand in the dark doorway of his family's house and look at the road that leads out of Thornwick and feel something move in his chest that has no name yet in any language spoken here. There is a word that does not exist in Middle English or in any language spoken in Thornwick for what Thornwick actually is. The closest Edmund could get, if you pressed him, if you sat him down and asked him to describe the thing he lives inside, beyond the mud and the field and the cold would be something like everyone, not a place, not a collection of houses arranged around a church and a well and William's perpetually escaping pig. Everyone. The village is not where Edmund lives. The village is who Edmund lives with, which is a different thing entirely, a thing so different that the distinction contains within it almost everything important about what it meant to be human in this century, in this particular configuration of survival. The well is where you understand this first. Every morning before the work begins, before the pottage, before the boots, the well receives the village in overlapping shifts. Margaret and Isobel and a young wife named Eleanor arriving in the barely dawn, exchanging the night's information with the efficiency of people who have been doing this their whole lives and have refined it to a kind of art. Not gossip, exactly. Something more functional than gossip, more necessary. Who is sick? Whose cow is limping? Whether Father Aldrich's mood yesterday suggests anything about the sermon coming Sunday. Whether the track to the mill is passable after yesterday's freeze. These are not small things dressed up as conversation. These are the vital signs of a collective body, taken daily, because the collective body's health is each individual body's survival, and everyone knows it, and no one has to say so. Stay with tea. For a moment, feel the particular warmth of it. When Edmund's shoulder seized up 3 winters ago, Robert finished Edmund's strip, not because Robert was asked, not because there was any formal system of obligation being invoked, because the strip needed finishing and Edmund could not finish it, and Robert was there, and this is what you do, and everyone in Thornwick knows this is what you do. With the same certainty they know that winter follows autumn, that the bell rings at prime, that William's pig will escape again before spring. The reciprocity is so old and so understood that it has lost any flavour of generosity and becomes simply the texture of how things work. The way water flows downhill not out of kindness, but because that is the nature of water, and this is the nature of Thornwick. There is a widow named Joan who lives at the north end of the village, in a house that is slightly smaller than everyone else's house, which in Thornwick means it is almost comically heartbreakingly small. Joan's husband died 4 years ago of the thing that comes in winter and sits down and does not leave. The same thing that took Robert's father, the thing that has no name here because naming it would require admitting it, comes for everyone eventually, and admitting that costs something nobody can afford. Joan has 3 children. The eldest is 11 and works. The younger 2 are not yet useful and are therefore still expensive. Joan does not starve. This is not because anyone has organized a relief effort or appointed a committee to assess her needs. It is because Margaret leaves a little extra at Joan's door when she has a little extra, which is not often, and Isobel shares her fire on the coldest evenings, and Robert's wife Agnes, not the Agnes who knows plants, a different Agnes. There are several Agneses in Thornwick because the naming options are limited, and God is apt. Aren't fond of repetition. Agnes brings bread when she bakes and there is any to spare. Joan does not thank them. Not formally. The thanks would make it charity, and charity would make Joan a recipient, and being a recipient would shift the weight of things in a way that the village cannot afford, and Joan cannot afford, and no one has ever had to explain this, because everyone already knows. Instead, she will, when Robert's Agnes is ill next autumn, sit with her children for 2 days without being asked. She will, when Edmund needs an extra hand at harvest, send her eldest without discussion. The village breathes in and breathes out, and the breath moves between everyone and no one counts it, because counting it would be the end of it. There is a darkness in this also. The same closeness that holds Joan also watches her. The same community that finished Edmund's strip also knows every detail of his marriage, his debts, his opinions about the miller, and the particular expression on his face when he returned William's pig last Tuesday, which has been analysed at the well with a thoroughness that would embarrass Edmund if he knew. and does not surprise Margaret at all because Margaret has never had a private feeling in her life and has made her peace with it. The village is a single breathing thing, and single breathing things do not have private parts. Everything is known, everything is discussed. The privacy you carry inside your own skull is the only privacy that exists. And even that is not entirely safe because Thornwick is very small and faces are very readable, and Isobel has been watching people for 61 years and very little escapes her. What lives in Joan's house, in the space between her children's sleeping faces and the low fire she keeps burning on the absolute minimum of wood, is a feeling she has not named and will not name. It is not grief exactly, though. Grief is in it. It is not fear exactly, though fear is present. It is the feeling of a woman who knows she is held, who can feel the village breathing around her like a living thing, who understands in her bones that she will not fall as long as the breathing continues. But the breathing, she also knows, is not guaranteed. Nothing in Thornwick is guaranteed, except the cold and the field and the bell and the bell and the bell. And the fact that tomorrow everyone will meet again at the well in the barely dawn and take the villager's pulse together and find it for one more morning still going. He arrives on a Thursday, stir, which is not significant except that Thursdays in Thornwick are indistinguishable from every other day of the week, and the arrival of anything on a Thursday therefore carries the particular insult of interrupting something ordinary. His name is, and this matters because he is not a force of nature, he is a man with a specific name and a specific face and a specific way of sitting on his horse that communicates everything you need to know about the relationship between where he has come from and where he has arrived. His name is Geoffrey, and he rides a horse that is better fed than anyone in Thornwick, and he has with him a boy of perhaps 14 who carries a wooden board with a piece of stretched skin on it and a small pot of ink. And between the horse and the board and the ink and the boy, Geoffrey represents something so concentrated in its power over Edmund's life that Edmund feels it before he sees it, the way you feel a change in weather before the sky confirms it. The village knows immediately. This is one of the functions of being a single breathing thing. Bad news travels at the speed of breath, which is faster than horses. By the time Geoffrey reaches the centre of Thornwick, everyone who needs to know already knows, and everyone who needs to be. Home has gone home, and everyone who needed to locate and count and present their portion has been locating and counting and presenting it in their minds since the moment the first person saw the horse on the track and understood what the horse meant. Hold very still now. This part has teeth. What Edmund owes is not a mystery. It has never been a mystery. It has never been a mystery. It is written not by Edmund, who cannot write, but in Geoffrey's ledger, in the stretched skin record that the boy holds with both hands and a carefulness that suggests he understands, even at 14, that what is written here is more real than what exists, that the record is the thing, and the thing is only evidence of the record. Edmund owes the Lord his labour, 2 days a week, more at harvest, the specific obligations varying by season, and the Lord's particular needs, which is to say the Lord's needs are not particular at all, but rather infinite and seasonal and non-negotiable. He owes grain. He owes this year ones. He owes this year a small additional payment in lieu of a labour service he could not perform in November, because the ground froze early, and the work the Lord wanted done required unfrozen ground, and the ground did not consult the Lord's schedule before freezing. This additional payment was not Edmund's idea. It was the Lord's idea, communicated through Geoffrey. Communicated through the specific and immovable logic of a system in which the man who owns the land makes the rules about the land, and the man who works the land inherits those rules with the same completeness that he inherits those. clay and the cold. Geoffrey moves through Thornwick with the efficiency of a man who has done this many times in many villages and has long since stopped seeing the villages as anything other than a series of calculations to be completed. He is not cruel, specifically. He is not kind, specifically. He is precise, which in this context is worse than either. He stands in front of each household and recites what is owed and receives what is owed, and the boy makes a mark on the stretched skin, and they move to the next house with a momentum that brooks no argument, not because argument is forbidden exactly, but because argument requires a language and a standing that Edmund does not possess in this transaction, that none of them possess, that the entire architecture of this moment is designed to make impossible. Robert pays. His face does a thing while he pays that is not quite an expression. It is the absence of expression. It is the absence of expression. The deliberate smoothing of a face that has decided wisely, carefully, at some cost, but what it is feeling will not be visible here, will not give Geoffrey anything to note on the stretched skin, will not become part of the record that is more real than the thing itself. Edmund pays. The grain he hands over is grain. He has already mentally subtracted from winter. He has been doing this subtracted from winter. He has been doing this subtraction since the harvest, adjusting and readjusting the figures in his head with a precision that would astonish Geoffrey if Geoffrey were capable of being astonished by Edmund, which he is not. Because Geoffrey does not think of Edmund as someone who does mathematics. Edmund does the mathematics anyway, in silence, in the currency of survived winters and children fed. And the figure he arrives at after Geoffrey takes his portion is a figure that requires, this year, a winter of particular carefulness. Not the worst kind of careful, but careful. Isobel watches from her doorway. She has watched this same scene, or a scene indistinguishable from it, more times than she can count, which is to say she has counted them all, and the count is a long one, and she has simply decided not to carry the number anymore. Her face gives nothing, her eyes give everything, but only to the person who knows to loo. Kay, and Geoffrey is not that person, and has never been that person, and will ride out of Thornwick this afternoon, and be in the next village by vespers, and will not think of Thornwick again until next year's Thursday. The cart moves down the track. The horses' hooves make their clean, precise sounds on the frozen mud, fairer and more regular than any sound Thornwick produces on its own. Edmund watches it go. Robert stands beside him. They do not speak. The cart rounds the bend and disappears behind the tree line, and the sound of it fades until there is only the ordinary sounds of Thornwick left. The bell, the wind, somewhere a child and the pig, indifferent and eternal, rooting at the base of William's fence. Edmund looks at the place where the cart was. He looks for a long time. Then he turns back toward his house, toward the smell of pottage and the sound of his children, and he carries with him something that has no name in any language spoken here, something that is not quite anger and not quite despair, but lives in the country between them, in the cold grey territory that a man learns to inhabit when he has been given no other country to live in. The village exhales. The fire is the best thing about the day. This is true every evening, but it is more true tonight. It is more true tonight, after Geoffrey and his horse and his boy and his stretched skin have gone, after the calculation has been made and set aside because the calculation is finished now, and setting it aside is the only intelligent response to a finished calculation. The fire is small. It is always small. It is always small. Wood being what it is, and the Lord's forest being where it is, but small fires in small rooms are not small in the way that matters. They are enormous in the way that matters. They fill the room with the only light there is and the only warmth there is, and they make the walls close in, which sounds like a bad thing but is ot, is actually the best thing. Is the room becoming a held thing, a cupped thing, a thing with edges that keep the dark and the cold on the other side where they belong? Edmund is home. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It is the whole point. Let everything slow down now. Let this be the pace of firelight. Margaret has done something with the pottage tonight that she does sometimes on evenings when the day has been hard in a specific way, when the hardness needs addressing not with words but with the only currency she has available, which is care applied to food. She has added something, a dried herb from the bundle above the door, something that smells of summer in a room that has forgotten summer, and the pottage is the same pottage it always is, oats and water, and the philosophical remains of a vegetable, and it is also, tonight, different. Edmund tastes the difference. He does not mention it. He eats with the focused appreciation of a man who understands that some things are said through soup, and that the correct response is to receive them in the same language they were offered, which is silence and presence and the clean bowl at the end. Thomas sits on the bench beside his father with the specific proximity of a child who is old enough to have stopped climbing into laps, but not old enough to have learned the performance of not wanting to, and so sits pressed against Edmund's arm with an elaborately casual air that fools no one and is not meant to. He has been serious all afternoon since Geoffrey's cart went down the track, with the seriousness of a boy who has understood something today that he did not understand yesterday, and is not sure yet whether understanding it is a gain or a loss. Edmund puts his hand briefly on Thomas's head, once without ceremony, and Thomas says nothing, and Edmund says nothing, and the fire says everything neither of them can. Alice is asleep already, the way small children fall asleep, suddenly, completely, as though sleep ambushed her mid-thought, which it probably did. She is curled against Margaret's side with her mouth slightly open and one fist pressed against her cheek, and she looks, in the firelight, like something so perfectly itself that looking at her costs something. Edmund looks at her. He looks for a moment longer than looking requires, with an expression that does not have a name, but that every parent across every century has worn in firelight beside a sleeping child. The expression that is love and fear in such perfect proportion that they become indistinguishable, that become a single thing with no word for it in any language anywhere. Outside, the village is settling. You can hear it if you are very still. The particular sound of Thornwick folding itself up for the night, a door, a voice calling once, not urgently, just the ordinary call of someone letting someone else know where they are, which is itself a kind of love, the ambient love of people who live close enough together to need to locate each other by sound. Somewhere Robert is banking his fire with the same calculation Edmund used, the same careful husbandry of warmth. Joan is putting her children down in the small house at the north end, telling them something, a story, a prayer, a list of instructions for morning. The genres blur at this hour. Peter stands at his doorway one last time, looking at the road that leads out of Thornwick, feeling the thing in his chest that still has no name, and then goes inside. The old woman is Isobel. The old woman is Isobel. Of course it is Isobel. She sits by her own small fire in her own small room, and she hums, not a song with words, or rather a song that had words once, long ago in a version of this village that none of the living can remember, words that have worn away over 61 years, of humming the way stone wears away under water, leaving only the shape, the breath, the melody stripped of everything except its own movement through the air. She does not know she is humming. She has been humming this same thing for so long that it has become simply the sound she makes when she is at peace, which is a remarkable thing, a quietly extraordinary thing, that after everything Isobel has seen and survived and outlasted, peace is still available to her, still arrives in the evening when the fire is going and the door is closed, still hums itself out of her without her permission. Edmund watches the fire go low. He is thinking, without exactly thinking it, about the dark section of the South Strip near the Common, the secret good soil, the place the field gave him that belongs only to him in the only way, anything in Thornwick belongs to anyone, which is not ownership, not legally, not in any language Geoffrey would recognize, but in the older language, the language of hands that have touched a thing so many times that the thing has taken the shape of the touching, and the touching has taken the shape of the thing, until you cannot say where one ends and the other begins. He will be in that field again tomorrow before the rooster knows it is morning. He does not mind. Margaret leans against him in the way she has leaned against him for 11 years, the particular lean of a person who has found the one place that is theirs in a world that belongs to everyone else, and Edmund puts his arm around her without looking. The way you do a thing you have done so many times, it no longer requires your eyes, only your body, only the knowledge your body carries and will carry until there is no more carrying to do. The fire goes low. The children breathe. Outside, the cold holds the village in its enormous patient hands, and the village, small and warm and briefly whole, breathes softly back, and in the morning everything will begin again, the way it always has, the way it always will, and that in the quiet country between sorrow and grace is enough, and has always been enough, and is the oldest story anyone has ever told.